All right, so here is the edit for, my edit at least, for the Vegas workshop. All right, so I have not yet looked at any of the footage. We're a couple weeks after the workshop. I've just been busy with other projects, and I'm finally going to sit down and show you everything from start to finish. This is going to be a long and boring video, but I'll put some chapter markers that you can go through and, jump to the place that you want. So we're literally starting from scratch, all right? So I already had a project created, but I have not yet dumped any of the footage in there. So first things first, we're going to come into Davinci Resolve. I pretty much only use this editing panel. I don't use these other two panels very often. And I use the color panel, which is down here. And from time to time, I'll use the sound panel and then the deliver panel. So we've got all the footage. As you can see, there's not a ton of footage, actually. But we're just going to go ahead and select all of this, and we're going to drag it into the the media pool here. It's going to ask if you want to change the project frame rate. We don't. I have my project frame rates defaulted at 24 frames per second. So whatever we shot at, if it was 30 or 60, or whatever the case might be, what we would want to do is, if we want to make sure everything ends up being 24 frames per second, we literally have to select all of the clips, and you can right click on them. You can go to clip attributes, and you can see pretty much universally everything is at 59.94 frames per second. I'm going to drop it down to 23.976, and that's going to conform all of this footage to 24 frames per second essentially. So now when I drop them into the timeline, even though if the clip was recorded at 60 frames per second, it's going to play back at 24 frames per second. So it will all be kind of in slow motion for that matter. Now, the next thing is we need to download some audio. I haven't looked at music yet. I don't know what the vibe of this is going to be like, but a couple things I do know. The day we were shooting, it was a rainy day. It was kind of overcast. So it's going to be kind of gloomy for Vegas. The house itself, I like to match the music for not only the tone of the atmosphere, the mood, what's happening outside, the weather and everything, but also for the house itself. This is not like a party house. When I was talking with, I don't remember who I was talking with, but like this house would be something like an executive would buy, or maybe just a CEO, or just some like higher, like wealthy business owner, but not like, it's not a mansion. It's not over the top. This would, I think 1.7 million was the cost of this house. So in Vegas for that range, you're talking like a higher level executive or something. And I think I was talking with either Fraser or one of you at the workshop about that. And that's kind of what we thought. So the music, I don't want to use EDM music because I don't want this to attract them. I know that the people who are going to be attracted to this video are going to be probably a pretty grounded person. They just want somewhere where that'll be a good place for their family, a place to have a kind of a retreat. So the music I'm going to be kind of looking for is going to be a little bit more subdued, a little bit more grounded. And the one thing I don't do is I do not spend a ton of time finding music. You'll find that I'm probably going to spend just a couple minutes looking for music. And if as I'm going I decide it doesn't work, then I will switch it out. But I'm looking for, again, something a little bit more subdued, a little more grounded is kind of what I'm looking for. I don't want it to be sad or, too slow, but I also know we don't have a ton of footage, so there's not going to be a ton of clips that I'm going to be cutting. So there's going to be some longer clips on this, so we're going to take that into consideration. So let's see what we've got here. I have a filter set up already for, as you can see, not chill, not fun, not scary, not angry, not quirky. I don't want any of that stuff pulling up in my searches, so that's why I have this bookmarked saved. So this is pretty much going to give me all the music that I prefer to use when it comes to editing these videos. So we're going to just kind of go through and see what we have. So we're going to start with Headliner. I already know that's definitely not something we're going to use. It's too much energy. This guy usually makes some kind of gloomy, thoughtful music, so he works sometimes. So far I like this. He used a lot of like minor chords. The thing that's hard for me with this music is that there's no beats, so it's kind of hard to determine when you inject different cuts. You kind of have to go based on mood and how that works. So I'm going to take note of this one as a possible tentative candidate for this video. Cody Martin always puts out good stuff. That could work too. I'm not a huge fan of orchestral music, but it's a little too grandiose for me sometimes. So I that could work, but I'm still leaning towards the second one. And all I'm doing is skipping through the song just to see what kind of moments are going to be later in the song that I might be able to play with. This is a bit too grandiose for me. I should also mention that I have a music background, so I might be listening to things different than you might be listening to them if you don't have a music background. So this maybe helps me pick music a little faster than others might be able to. This is too sad. We don't need acoustic music. This has an explosions in the sky kind of vibe to it. I like it. All right, so I'm leaning between this one here that might be a little too sad, but I'm probably leaning towards this one. Yep, we're gonna go ahead and select this one, so we're gonna go ahead and download. Okay, here's I posted a video a while back about downloading. I usually just download the MP3s. Somebody gave me crap because I didn't download the WAV. You don't need WAV files for this. This is an MP3 is a condensed version. Think of MP3 as like a JPEG, and a WAV kind of like a RAW version of audio. I only need the JPEG version for this. It's just a real estate video. It's not going to be shown in theaters. I don't need to manipulate the audio at all. The MP3 is going to work just fine for me. Truth be told, I just don't think about it that much. Sometimes I'll do a click on WAV just because I'm not really thinking. Oops. And we're going to go ahead and put it in the clips icon here. I also have some sound effects that I might add, but I'm not entirely sure yet. So let's go ahead and drag the audio into here as well. And now we can get started. So first things first, I'm going to go ahead and drag that audio on the timeline. Here we go. I'm going to increase the size of it just so I can see what the waveforms that I'm working with. Okay. All right, so I know that I've got some drone footage. I know that I have I think 1 or 2 time-lapse clips. I know I have some outdoor footage. So I kind of have to ask myself, for something like this, you know, it's kind of a long, drawn-out introduction, so I might use like a little vignette from the inside. Let's start with this one here. So what I like to do is it's called scrubbing, when you just hover your mouse over the clip itself and you can see the stuff move. I'm marking in points and an out point. and then I can just hold down Option and drag that onto the timeline. Now you hold down Option because you don't want the audio to be dragged onto the timeline with it. So let's see what we got here. All right, so I don't know if I'm going to end up using this clip to start, but as of right now, I'm just thinking like it'd be nice to have a little bit of a vignette. I'm going to speed this up. And you can see there's a little bit of shakiness to it, so I'm going to go ahead and add a stabilization on there. And right now, I'm kind of just experimenting. I don't know that I'm going to use these two clips as an opener. Generally speaking, a safe play is to just start with a drone clip and work your way in. But I'm kind of trying something different because I know we don't have a lot of exterior footage, and yeah, I don't know. I'm just experimenting at this point. I'm going to straighten the verticals on this thing. Oh, that's right. I forgot the window is this window is actually crooked. For those of you who are watching this who weren't at the workshop, this window here is crooked. It was installed at a weird angle, so I may not use this one after all. Very, very long clips. I don't think I'm going to do that. What I'm essentially using this for, and you'll see, I think what I'm going to do is add the address right here. I'm going to speed this up a little bit more just so it's kind of a time lapse. All right, and then I think from here I can probably do one of the exterior shots. But I thought there was a, I think we got a shot that's a little more close up of the exterior, but we might not. Ah, there we go. So this kind of brings me outside. In fact, I don't necessarily need this one anymore. I'm going to take that clip out. And in the music, what I'm listening for are subtle string changes because there's obviously no beats, but there kind of are beats at the same time. I mean, a musician is still going to work with some kind of structure. It's just that the beats aren't going to be as apparent. I thought we had another clip that was more of the front patio area. So I've got some sunny footage of the front exterior, but I think I'm going to use the gloomy footage because otherwise it's like, why is only one clip of this sunny and the rest of it's all gloomy? Okay, we're going to go ahead and correct the verticals on this as well. As you can see, correcting verticals in Resolve is very similar to how you would correct them in Lightroom. They make it very easy to do this. We're going to go ahead and find... It's kind of at a weird angle because it's... well, one, Steve seemed to have filmed this with a letterbox, which are the black bars that go... Let's see. I wanted to keep these leaves in here, but I probably would have personally framed this up a little bit different. Nothing particularly wrong with this shot. It's just that there's too much. The house is too much into the foreground, so I may just get rid of the need to have these and kind of just zoom in a little bit more, just because I want more of the house in here. But it's still, you know, I know we're getting the trees in here, so, but it's still, I probably would have framed this up a little bit different. And this is not, by the way, not a knock on Steve at all. It's just that, you know, we just film things different. And I'm basically editing his footage essentially, so it wasn't really my vision that we're editing here. And I forgot this was slowed down, so I'm actually going to speed the footage up so we can see some of the leaves move. Let's see, and it was only done by 200%, so let's just go ahead and... All right. So now I think we can probably go to a drone clip. So we're actually, so if you look at the pattern of this, what I'm probably going to do is add a title here. And I've been using these Motion VFX titles. And I think we're just going to use this first one because I like it. And I don't remember the address. I'll have to look it up. And we'll go ahead and... I can't remember the name of this. I think it was called... I'll change the name later, and then I'll do the presented by and then the agent's name right there. But I'm going to add a Gaussian blur to... Well, first I'm going to add a cross dissolve here, but a fade from black. Actually, let's go ahead and take that out. Let's see, video transitions. We're just going to do, we're going to make this ease in. I'm going to add a Gaussian blur to this as well. So let's see here. I always forget how to spell it and where it's at. Oh, there it is. And if we go to effects, we can add some keyframes to this. So we're going to add one keyframe here. And we're going to add another one here. We're going to add one right here. And one right at the end as well. All right, so the keyframe, what we want to happen is we want this to blur right here, stay blurred, and then we want it to come out of that blur and be clear for the remainder of this clip. So we'll go to the first keyframe, that'll stay at 40. The next keyframe will be at 0. And the final keyframe should be at 0 as well. So what should happen theoretically for some reason it keeps on fading back to 40, so let's figure out why it's doing that. Let's go ahead and make sure it there. Yeah, I don't know why it's going back to a 40% blur there. It's kind of strange. Let's bring that to 0. Like I said, it's a little finicky. So it's a little bit of a long outside clip, so we'll probably throw a drone clip in here. You hear the bass picking up, so we're going to go ahead and try to find a dramatic drone clip. I think something like this, probably. All right, I think that's good. And then this would have been a good opening shot, actually, one of these, but oh well. And maybe we'll get one of the strip, just to give them a sense of where we're at in relation to that. Just putting a mark because I know we've got another change in the music right there. In fact, let's just go ahead and do that really quick. So a lot of the times, what I might do is I'll play the music and I'll find the different cut points. You just have to listen carefully for when there's subtle music changes. And then you can add markers there, and then that'll help guide you as you're assembling footage. So as you can see they're somewhat evenly spaced, and so there is a beat here. It's just you can't really, it's very subtle. So that spot where the angel comes in and the music swells a little bit, that's going to be a good reveal type shot into a nice view. So that's about 1:28 into the video. So far about 45 seconds into it. So let's just see what we've got so far. So this clip right here is a little long. It's a little long. So I might do a cut and then zoom in a little bit. I wish we had one more clip that was focused on this patio area that I could cut to, but I don't think we have one of those, unfortunately. I'm just going to glance one last time. Nope, we don't. So it's no problem, but it is a little long, so let's see what we can do to... I think we're just going to leave it. That needs a little bit of stabilization, so let's go ahead and add some stabilization on here. By the way, for those of you who using Premiere or Final Cut, I just want you to, did you notice how fast that stabilization is? Just keep that in mind. So we can probably start coming into the house from this one. So let's see what we've got here. That's the only shot I think we had of the entry. So I think what we'll do is we'll start right here. We'll go ahead and reverse this because it's backwards. And remember that I conformed all this footage to 24 frames per second, so sometimes it's a little bit too slow and you can speed it up and you won't lose any frames. Straighten those verticals up a little bit. And that's pretty much the same clip as this, so we're not going to... This might be a little bit wider though, so maybe we'll use this one instead. This one just seems to be framed up a little bit better in terms of height, whereas this one, I'd like to see a little bit more of the table. It's just right at the bottom of the frame. I like this. It's just composed a little better in my opinion. So that's all we have for that room. And then I know that from there we went, so I got to keep in mind that at this point is where that swell comes in, and I want to have a cool shot for right there, and I don't know what that's going to be yet. I'm just kind of work my way back there. So the next shot, I know we went back into the dining room from there, so maybe we'll do that and work our way to the kitchen. So there was a transition shot from this little sitting room into the dining room. I think that's it right there. Let's see. In fact, I didn't shoot this footage. Normally I shoot in order of how I'm going to be doing that. So I'm going to quickly pause and organize this. So I know we've got the, we'll call it the den, the room that we're working in now. We've got the dining room. We've got the kitchen. We've got the living room. We've got the bedroom, and we've got the office. And then we've got the backyard. So I'm going to go ahead and just dump the footage from those into, let's see what this is. I can't remember where this is. I think this was a transition into the living room. So we'll go ahead and put that in there. We'll call this dining. This was a dining room as well. This is a transition into the office. This was the living room. So this will just help us to organize the footage a little bit better. All right, so we have our footage organized. That's going to be super helpful. So I'm glad we did that. So now it's going to be a little bit easier to find everything. Like I said, normally when I shoot in the order of which I'm going to be editing. It just helps for a more efficient workflow. And obviously there's times you can't do that. You see other shots. And I just kind of keep a mental note that I had at the end of the shoot. I have some extra shots. So I'm just mindful of that. But for the most part, I'm going to try to shoot in order as much as possible. But since I didn't shoot this and I don't know exactly what Steve shot, I'm going to organize them in bins like this. Well, that's how. Let's go ahead and continue working on this. So we've got all the shots we needed for the den. We're going to go ahead and transition into the dining. Now, I know there was a transition shot, as I mentioned before. Let's go ahead and find that. I think it's going to be this one here. Yep. So this is kind of a boring clip because there's not a lot of motion and it's not framed the best. You can kind of see like there's a little bit too much negative space on either side. So we're going to go ahead and zoom in on this thing. And in color, I may end up darkening these edges. I'm not sure yet. So that's a little bit too long. So let's first. Yeah, see, I like these ones, so I'll probably end up using one of these. So what we'll do is we're just going to tease that we're going back into this room from here. But I'm going to use this shot to finish that beat up. Now, I don't mind a lot of motion. I like things when they're subtle and smooth, but I think that with video, when you have things moving in the frame, it's better to keep still, but you want to indicate that there's some kind of motion. Otherwise, it's just going to look like a photo, and it just looks bad. So, like this one still feels a little too still for me. So I'm going to speed it up even more. Yeah, this shot really doesn't do it for me. I think I might take it out altogether, to be honest with you, because it's not doing anything for me. So in this clip, we did one of Steve's stop motion deals. So we're going to go ahead and work with that. Now, this is my first attempt at ever editing one of these stop motion things. This is something Steve came up with. I don't know if he got the idea from somebody else. Knowing him, he probably just came up with it because he's a super creative dude. But this is my first time attempting anything like that, so we'll see how this goes. So the idea is what we want to be able to do, for those of you who are not familiar with the stop motion, we're going to make this clip be 3 different scenes, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So we kept the camera on a slider going back and forth, and we would change the scenes between each back and forth interval so that we could overlay them, and the scene would change within one motion. And you'll see what I'm talking about as I assemble this. Just got to find the right framing. And again, this goes kind of slow. All right, then Steve comes in and changes everything. And then we overlay this one over it. But we need to align the clips to where they all kind of match up. So what you can do is you can put this clip over here and you can bring the opacity down on it. And then just try to line them up as best as you can. So what I'm looking at is this little dot right there. I want to try to find that equivalent over on this side. So now it looks like that matches up pretty good. So now what we do is we just, and then we find the third one. So we need to clean this up a little bit, but you kind of get the idea. Pretty cool effect. Kudos to Steve on that. This one is off though, so we need to fix this. So let's bring the opacity down again. I want to get these aligned perfect, so let's see. Whoop. And that's it. That's the effect. Very cool. I'm gonna close these. And obviously we can decide between these which ones we want to be showing. So let's see here. So I'm just refining this to taste. I can't really explain or articulate why I'm adjusting it the way I'm adjusting it, but just trust me that I've got some kind of reason in my head why I'm doing this. So I think I'm gonna actually switch these around because the light starts opened right here. Let's move this up to the top and bring this down here. And let's switch these around as well. All right. Pretty cool. Again, kudos to Steve for the idea. So that's it for the dining room. Now I think we're going to transition into the living room, which will be right here for us. Let's be a good little transition shot. We got that epic swell coming up soon, and I think I've got a clip for that. Let's see, we'll use another transition shot for the... We got a couple transition shots actually for the living room. I will take credit for this shot, although it wasn't my idea. Chuck, who was one of the workshop attendees, on the first day, this was his idea. I just executed it. Oh, actually, no, I forgot there was a time lapse right here. I'll use this. And now there's a couple different ways to do time lapse. This is one way. You can just let a video record and it'll go. But there's another way that I'll show you a little later because we do have one time lapse clip we're going to add shortly here. So this is just a video I let record, and we're going to go ahead and just speed this thing up. I know we don't need the end of it because people started walking in frame here. So probably go to about right here. We'll speed that thing up. That's good. We'll go ahead and correct the verticals. And I'm noticing that I forgot I had this on a slider. So we're actually gonna... We've got some different types of correction to do here. So we need to add keyframes. So we need to do one keyframe on the front end and one keyframe on the end and adjust them individually. Because we want them, as we go back and forth, we want them to be on the same axis. So this needs to come up a little bit. Maybe a little bit too high. That's good. And you can see like the front and back match a little better, so be a much better, yeah, much smoother. Okay. Now we transition into the living room. We've got that swell coming up, and I think I know what shot we're going to use for that. I think this is going to be our big angel swell shot. So I need to find one more clip that will help me to get to that. Oh, you know, I could have transitioned to the office right there. Maybe I'll do that. Yeah, right there, I want that. This is where I want this clip to come in. Oh, that's what. I knew we filmed. I remember, okay, I was wondering in my head, I'm sitting here thinking, why do we film so many of these clips? And I remember because we did several iterations of this, one with this sliding door open. And then finally at the end, I was like, you know what, let's shift the lens down so we have a little bit more of the foreground so you can kind of see the difference. So we've got this clip here, and there's a lot of ceiling happening here, and that ceiling fan isn't really that relevant, but the furniture down here kind of is. So what we did was we shifted the clip down so that we removed some of that. So couldn't remember why we did that. So let's go ahead and have that clip. I'm going to pause a second and talk about verticals and horizontals. Just like in photography, I personally think it's important to correct your verticals and horizontals in video. It's not as challenging doing it in Davinci Resolve, but you're always better off trying to nail them on location. That's not always possible because you're kind of in a hurry, especially if you're working on a slider or a gimbal. Really hard to nail verticals and horizontals with motion. So the way I correct those in post-production, and I hinted at this earlier when I was doing the time lapse, but you create a keyframe at the beginning and a keyframe at the end of your frame. And essentially, you just try to line those up so that by the beginning and the end, they're kind of on the same axis. Also, one thing I didn't mention yet is shoot wide. You don't necessarily want to. So one of the things that, if in hindsight, if we could go back and reshoot this, I would have had the majority of these shots shot a little bit wider. Because as you'll notice, like if we bring this clip in here, there's letterbox on the top and bottom. So we lose a lot of detail when I zoom in to get rid of that letterbox. So shoot a little wider if you can, just slightly wider. Just try to keep in mind that you're going to be correcting verticals. And you know, possibly cropping things in a little bit. So just shoot a little bit wider so you have some more wiggle room in post-production. So we're good there. Now again, I need one clip to fill this gap in, and I'm not sure what that is yet. So I think what I'm probably going to do is come back here and see what we can't do to fill in this. And I'm thinking this is where I'm going to probably put the office shot in. Now I know there was a transition shot to the office, so we're going to inject that somewhere in here. I'm not sure where yet. So that clip doesn't need to be as long as it is. So I think we're going to move these clips over here. And right here is where we're going to inject this. And we can move these over. So I'm going to have that office shot here. So we did a couple of these because what we were doing was we were creating fake light from here. Again, it was very overcast. There was no sun coming through. So we actually put a light on the outside, creating all of this light over here. So we're going to have to decide which one we want to use. Oh, we also created a fake time lapse, so we're actually going to probably use that one. No, probably not. Maybe. So what we did was we had a light on the outside of the window on a C-stand, and we were rotating the light slowly as the camera was moving to create an illusion that there was a time lapse happening. I don't know that it worked the way we intended it to work though. Let's just take a look. It kind of did. Didn't quite have it framed up the way I would have liked, but probably I'm just using one of these shots here. The idea had merit though. I mean, if you look at it, you can kind of see where this might apply. If you wanted to create the illusion of a fake time lapse, or a time lapse rather. So we'll go ahead and just bring this one in. Alright, it's looking good so far. Some of the frames obviously still have to render a little bit, so they'll be doing that in the background. Alright, so let's move on. Alright, so we are about halfway through already. This doesn't have to take as much time as some of us make it out to be. Now we still have to do color grading and fine tune some things, but for the most part we're getting there. So now we need to transition into the kitchen. We also have this bedroom, I forgot. I think the bedroom will bring us into the backyard and then we'll wrap it up from there. So we're about halfway through the house. We got the office. So let's do the kitchen. These should not be in here. Alright, so the kitchen, I know we've got a couple things. We've got, we'll use this as our transition shot into the kitchen. That could be another transition, that could be another transition. We've got another angel voice coming in I can hear, so we will use that to do our next. After I straighten this up, we have another stop motion that we will be doing here. And we've got a couple challenges here. This is not straight, so we're going to have to straighten this up, but I think we'll do that after the fact. Alright, so now we'll go ahead and we'll align these. Start with this one. And this is obviously a much easier way to do it. You just can kind of scrub back and forth until they all align. Switch these around. Make this one on the bottom. Actually, we'll make this one on the bottom, rather. Because the lights are on and we want them to go off, because what we want is to drag the eyes back out into this dining room area. That was at least the plan on shoot day. We'll see if that actually works. That works. And then obviously the clips are a little crooked, so we're going to have to fix that, but I'm not going to do that just yet. I'm going to actually, after I color grade everything, I'm going to go back and nest those clips so that those three clips are considered one clip, and then I'll fix that. But right now, if I were to correct the lines and the orientation on them individually, it'd be kind of a nightmare because they all start at different lengths. So we're not going to worry about that now. All right, and then we've got, actually, this clip is a good clip, and I want to use this. Now, I'm obviously taking some liberty with the beats on this at this point because, you know, the beats in between and the space in between beats is just too long for all of them. So since there's not some defined beats, I have some flexibility with when I can start new clips. This clip actually ends a little early, so we're gonna I think the kitchen's done. From here we're going to head into the bedroom, and I've got this hallway shot we'll use. Oh, this hallway shot actually went into the living room. Interesting. So I might even throw that in there. I could probably throw a crossfade in right there just because it'd be a nice spot for it. All right, looks good. So I thought I had a transition shot to the bedroom, but I don't. So I might just use a little vignette to transition. That's not the best shot. Let's see. This is a good transition shot. Obviously it shows we're in the bedroom now. I want to reverse this because I want it to come back. Let's see here. Speed this up a little bit. Not in love with this shot. It's just not it's not so much the shot, it's not a very interesting part of the room. I'm sure it's important, but I'm not going to include it for the time being. That's a good shot of the bedroom, so we'll go back to this shot here. It's a very long shot. Ooh, I like this shot better actually. We use this one because that way I can transition this into the next one. So we've got some barrel distortion happening on this. We're going to go ahead and fix that. And then now we can, I think this shot makes more sense now because we've got a shot reversing into it. And then we're heading into the bathroom after this shot. So we will, let's see. Let's get this corrected. I think this is meant to be slightly at an angle, but I feel like it should be straight, so I'm straightening it. All right, and that's all for the bedroom. I think now we'll go ahead and head into the bathroom. And there's actually a time lapse in here I want to use. We actually have to make that, so we'll get out of Resolve here in a minute. All right, so we've got this clip assembled. Now we have to process a time lapse. Okay, this is a completely different process, and I'm going to show you how that works right now. So we're going to go ahead and open up Lightroom. Switch to my actual catalog. This is my real estate photography catalog. And I just realized I had pushed my mic away, so sorry if the audio has been horrible for the last half hour or so. So we're going to go ahead and import all of the photos from the time lapse. And we're going to open up the program LR Timelapse. This is what we use to process our time lapses. So we've got 740 photos for this one time lapse. Now the way LR Timelapse works is it basically reads all of the files, metadata from Lightroom. It doesn't actually edit photos, and it creates micro adjustments based on that metadata and whatever parameters you set for it. So we have to find that folder first and foremost. I think it's in here. Yep, Dropbox. And it's right here. So these are all of the photos. And what we need to do is we need to assign keyframes. So first and foremost, what's happening now is LR Timelapse is generating a preview of what the timeline looks like as far as the exposures are concerned. So you can see there's these lines here, and right now it's generating, this blue line is the basically light and darks. So it's adjusting, or it's showing you a preview of what it looks like if you were to just to play it as is. So up here are like really bright highlights. Right here are highlights. Right here's a really dark spot. So if you preview it, you can kind of see how the light fluctuate and kind of flickers throughout the entire process. What LR Timelapse is going to do for us, it's going to try to smooth out that flicker as much as possible. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to create some keyframes, and you create keyframes based on the points in which you may want to edit. Now this second half of the clip, we really don't need any additional, it's pretty smooth for the most part, but up here it's pretty bad. So I'm going to create a lot of keyframes just so that I can make some adjustments over here to these. So as you can see, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 keyframes during that entire process. That should help me smooth out the entire thing, but we've got 10, we've got 13 total keyframes. We'll go ahead and save this. It's going to save the keyframes to the metadata, and then I can pull up Lightroom. I'm going to select all of the images. I'm going to refresh, and I'm going to go to metadata here. I'm going to go to read metadata from files. And what that's going to do, it's going to update all of the metadata, and all of these 4-starred images are the ones that are keyframed in LR Timelapse. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to my filter that shows just those keyframes, and we're only going to edit these keyframes and nothing else. And the goal is to basically make all of these keyframes somewhat evenly exposed, as close as we can at least. So you can see there's a drastic difference between these two photos. We want to try to smooth that out a little bit. So we'll make our very first, this is the very first, there's always a keyframe made on the first and the very last photo. So the very first photo is going to kind of set the tone for what we want this entire clip to look like. One thing I also want to keep in mind is that since I am going to be editing this in Davinci Resolve, I'm going to kind of desaturate this so that I have more control over the color. But first and foremost, I want to make sure I can get the exposure dialed in as best as I can. So we're going to go ahead and just work with that for a few minutes here. And mainly I want this light strip, because what we're hoping to do is chase this light strip as it moves across this way. So that's pretty much good right there. I'm going to go ahead and desaturate just a hair. I don't need to do it too much, but something like that. Just a little bit. And then I'm going to go ahead and select all frames. I'm going to come up to this little icon. This is LR Timelapse created this. And we're going to sync keyframes using this. So that way LR Timelapse is certain to only grab keyframe or metadata from the processes that we're doing for their program. I know that's confusing. Just trust me. Just use that. All right, then, so we've got that. We've synced essentially all of the photos up together. But as you can see, this one got really dark. This one's really bright. So we kind of have to make some other adjustments to some of these. So this one definitely needs some work. And it's possible that maybe Steve made some manual adjustments to that. I'm not sure. But we want to try to make the exposure somewhat even between these two frames. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be close enough because, again, LR Timelapse will even it out for us. We just wanted to get as close as we can. So that's pretty good. We'll go ahead and sync that with all of these. And then we'll just double check. This gets really bright right here, so we're going to bring this back down. And a lot of back and forth. And every time lapse is going to be different because, again, the flicker is created by the intensity of the sun. So oh, and this is another thing. I don't know if for those of you who were at the workshop, I was briefly talking about locking your exposure. The way you shoot a time lapse like this is you set the camera in aperture priority mode, and you basically just run intervals to create images. If you lock in your exposure, it will reduce this flicker as much as possible. So we didn't have the exposure locked in for this, so it does create a little bit more work on the back end, whereas if the exposure was locked in, the camera would have compensated on the shutter speed for a lot of these photos to try to keep an even exposure throughout. So just a heads up, if you go to decide to start shooting time-lapse, remember to lock in your exposure. For the most part, the rest of these are going to be evenly exposed. I'm kind of looking at the histogram over here. So I'm not going to do a ton of additional editing to these, because I know that after the 5th or 6th keyframe, things were pretty smooth for the rest of the things. So we're just gonna do some basics here. Just want to make sure the histogram is pretty much even as we go along. So yeah, if we look at our histogram, it should all be in the relatively similar place. It gets kind of bright right here, so let's bring it back down a hair. Yeah, and they look like they're all pretty much staying in that same vicinity. So I think we're good here. We're going to go back to our grid view. We're going to save these. So go to metadata, save metadata to files. And that's going to save all of those updates, okay? And then what we do is we go back to LR Timelapse. We're going to hit reload, and it's going to reload all of that metadata into LR Timelapse. It takes just a minute, and you can see this is where all the keyframes are. And these are basically the updates to, and now you can see, it's hard to visualize, and it'll make more sense once you do a few of these, but you can see things are starting to look a little smoother. Now this isn't that same crazy timeline that we had before, but it should give you an indication of what we're dealing with. From here, all you do is you do auto transition, and this is where LR Timelapse is going to do its first run of trying to smooth out the metadata. So it's going to go through all of these details. It's going to make micro adjustments to try and match up, and you're going to see a new timeline will be generated here. That's still going to look a little insane, so you just have to be patient with it. There's a few things we're going to do here. In the meantime, we're going to find a neutral location that shouldn't be changing all that much. And now what you don't see is this visual previews option is selected, and we're going to create a rectangle, which is kind of just a sample area of an area in the photo we want to remain somewhat consistent as far as the light is concerned. And that will come in handy once we go to do a final deflicker, and we'll get to that in a minute. So as you can see, just with the transition, it's still crazy. It's jagged all over the place, but once this process is through, I'll show you how we can kind of smooth that out a little bit. All right, so let's go ahead and preview since the auto transition has been created. As you can see, there's still quite a bit of flicker happening, so we'll get to that in a second. So when all is said and done, what we will probably end up doing in the final edit is we're going to probably cut this first half out, just because it is a little too insane. But what we're going to do now is we're going to run this visual deflicker, and it's going to go through and it's going to make its best attempt to smooth out this jaggedness here. It's not going to be pretty. It's still going to be pretty extreme because it was extreme. But we can run a few passes of this. It'll go through several times, and we'll smooth it out. We're going to start with 2 for now. And if 2 isn't enough, we can run more passes, and each time a pass is run, it'll smooth it out even more. So as this is wrapping up, I'll explain what's happening. So you can see this orange type line. That is the deflicker. That is where all of the processing for the deflicker came. So the more drastic of a change you see in the line, the more drastic of a number or an adjustment that it made. And if you look at the pink line, before it was incredibly jagged and all over the place, you can see it's flattened out quite a bit more. I can continue to run this deflicker and it'll continue to smooth it out. But at some point you just have to say, you know, it's going to be a little flickery. And that's just kind of what we got with the scene that we get. So we're good here. So we'll go ahead and preview what we've got here. And as you can see, it's quite smooth. It's smoothed out quite a bit. Again, there's still going to be flicker because that's just what happened. The light was flickering on the walls and whatnot. But overall, it's a much smoother video. So from here, what we would do is we'll go ahead and we're going to, I'm just going to, usually you can export this from Lightroom, but I'm just going to go ahead and export this internally through LR Timelapse. And we're going to go ahead and add this directly. I think it'd probably be easier if we just add this directly to the folder where our clips are. So we'll go ahead and do that. And I'm just going to export it as 4K. We'll just do H.264. That's fine. Ultra high quality. We're not going to do a 16:9 aspect ratio right now because I want room to crop, but otherwise you can export in 16:9 and tell it where you want it to go. But I'm just going to do it as full right now. And this is going to take a while to process. I'm guessing probably 5 minutes or so, 5-10 minutes. So while I'm waiting for this to process, I'm going to go ahead and hop back into Resolve and continue adding to my timeline. And we can just anticipate that there will be a clip going here of that time lapse. So let's listen to the music and see where our next cut is. Right there. So we'll either have a cut right here. I'll go ahead and mark it. Right there. So I do know that we are going to head outside at this point. And I know there's some transition shots that we're going to use as well. So let's look for those. We've got this right here. Let's use one of these. And by the way, I just want to make a point here. So right now, again, if you remember, this footage has been slowed down to 24 frames per second. It was shot at 60 frames per second. The thing we want to remember is that if this is shot at 60, now it was really windy out this day, and these leaves were kind of crazy. So if we put this back to where it was at 60 frames per second, which I think it was actually a little more than 60 frames per second. It was probably something like this. The leaves aren't crazy, but they're moving kind of fast compared to the pace of the video and the sound of the music. So that's why shooting at a higher frame rate and being able to slow it down later is helpful, because it won't be as dramatic when these leaves are moving around. It's just it's a little easier to deal with. Same with this, like this wind is insane right here. But having it slowed down is a little more easy to tolerate. I probably would have made this shot a little bit wider, but we're going to go ahead and just trim this up here. And this is going to be one of our last shots, so let's see how we're doing. We're about halfway through the export on LR Timelapse. We're going to keep on going. Let's straighten this up here. And then I think what we're going to do is, I think we'll add this one right here. Not a ton of motion happening on this one, but there's a little bit. So, and I don't want to speed it up because, again, those leaves are crazy. I want to keep the leaves moving somewhat slow. So what I could do is I could add this dynamic zoom on it, which is basically a Ken Burns kind of effect. And that's pretty much all of the clips. So I know that we had some more drone clips, and I'll probably wrap up with a decent drone clip of this. And this is kind of a cop-out way to end a video, but we're just out of footage at this point, so we're just going to make do with what we have. And if you notice, the music doesn't quite end here, so I'm going to try to find out how I can bring this part to the beginning here. So and if you notice, the music still continues for quite a bit here, and I want to figure out how to bring this ending to up here. So I think what we're going to do is trim up some of the music in here, bring some of this swell up toward this way. That way we can end over on this one. But let's see. And bring this in here. Let's see if this works. Okay, so we need to transition these a little bit. Okay, we're still going to be waiting for that for a few minutes. There's another thing I can show you guys that I kind of forgot about on this right here. So let's say we want this video to be 3 minutes and 9 seconds long, okay? There is a way you can manually, or automatically rather, make this audio the length that you want it. And that's if you have an Adobe Creative Cloud subscription, you also have access to Adobe Audition. So what you do essentially is you go into Adobe Audition, you create a new multi-track session, you drag your music onto the timeline, and then you go into the properties panel over here and you're going to see this option called stretch. In this duration section right here, you're going to put the approximate time that you want the clip to be stretched to, and it takes a couple minutes, but then it will go ahead and it will try to remix essentially in fact I think that's the feature, it's called remix, but it'll try to recreate the song into being that length for you. Now, for songs that have clearly defined patterns and clearly defined beats, it works a little better in my experience. I don't use this a ton anymore because, to be honest with you, it's kind of hit or miss a lot of the time. But we're going to see what this looks like if I were to drag this back into Resolve. We're just going to see if this works without having to chop it up manually. So we're going to go ahead and export this entire session. We're going to call this remix, and we're going to save this into the folder where we are working out of. We'll save it in here actually. So we're going to go ahead and open up Resolve again. We're going to go to our media pool. We're going to drag this audio, into this. And we'll get to that in a second. I don't want to entirely destroy the timeline we've created. I also have to go ahead and import our time lapse, which just finished up now. So we're going to import our time lapse into here. And let's go ahead and do that first before we do the music part. So we're going to go ahead and drag our time lapse into its little slot here. And we're going to adjust our perspective, correct our verticals and our horizontals, and see what this looks like. So as you can see, it's a little too much for this clip, so we're going to shorten it up. I don't think we need this pool clip here. I'm going to take that out. This one's fine, but the other one is just kind of that's a little bit too much. I'm going to turn this dynamic zoom off, and I'm going to manually do it here. So we'll just zoom in a little bit right here, and we'll even set this right here. And on this clip, we'll move this over this way. So I just want a little bit of motion in there. And we're going to go ahead and add our video transition. We're going to do a cross dissolve. Actually, we're going to do dip to color resolve. Oops. So we want this to fade to black, and we're going to ease out. No, I don't like that. It's too fast. So let's go ahead and put our cross resolve back on there, and we'll do a film fade. I'll show you what that looks like. Oops. Switch this to film. And this just creates a little bit of smoother transition, I think. Yeah, I like that better. Okay, so we're going to go ahead, we're going to call this timeline good to go for now, but I want to go back and experiment with that remix that we made. So let's find our timeline, and actually we can just go in here. And I'm going to duplicate this because I don't want to destroy what we've done so far. So let's go ahead and just delete the audio out of here, and we're going to drop our remixed audio into here. So let's just see what this gave us, this remix. Yeah, so you can tell it's already messed with the beats a lot. And again, there's no clearly defined beats in here, so it did okay. I could probably go through and revise the length of all these clips, but I'm not going to. So it didn't do a bad job. I just am not up for going through and revising all these clips. So we're just going to stick to our manually edited, and we've got to shorten it up just a little bit more because I removed a clip here. So let's do that right now. Let's see. Oh, actually, that might be a good spot right there. Let's see if this works. There. We'll go ahead and put an audio transition on here. All right, and we're just about done. So we can probably shorten some of these up too, because these aren't necessary. All right, and we're just gonna stabilize this because there was one little jerk at the end. All right, now this assembly is done as far as I'm concerned. Obviously, there's probably going to be some refinement we need to do before we get too far, but for the most part, I think we're good how we are, all right? So now we're gonna go ahead and start color grading. So what we'll do is we'll come into the color panel, and down here, I'll just give you kind of a little quick tour. Down here, you've got your timeline of clips. Essentially all you're doing is you're just gonna click on each one of these individually and you color grade them one at a time. You can do things in batches if you want, whatever you decide to do. The couple of things I'll add here, we've got a lot of mixed footage. We've got stuff that was shot on a Sony, stuff that was shot on a Canon, stuff that was shot on a DJI, and a Blackmagic camera. So we have a lot of mixed footage. So you can't just copy and paste necessarily. You kind of have to go through one at a time. But there are shortcuts you can do. You can add a LUT, which is kind of like a preset, but not really. It's kind of a set of parameters that it's let's just, for the sake of simplicity, let's just think of a LUT as a preset, but it's really not, okay? It's a look of some sort. So we can apply a LUT to everything, but the problem is that LUT is going to respond differently to different types of footage depending on the codec that was used and whatnot. So what we're going to do is we're going to just start doing these one by one. I know that a lot of these, like for instance, I think this one was shot on the Canon camera. All these H.265 ones, I think, were shot on the Canon. Obviously, this is the DJI. So anyway, we're just going to go through these one by one. I know it's going to take a while, but it'll be worth it in the end. So first things first, there is a way that we can add all of these clips to a color group. And I like to do that because what that allows you to do is you can create one overarching look. And then you can go through and you can make individual adjustments to each of the clips to accommodate for changes. So what we're going to do is we're going to add all of these into a new group. We're going to call this LUT, and we're going to switch this over here, clip. We're going to switch this to group post clip. All right. Now this panel over here is called the node panel. Think of this as kind of like a layer panel. It gets very confusing to think about, so I don't want you to think about it too much, okay? Just think of this as this box here is any changes you make to this is kind of like what you make in say Lightroom, right? Anything you do in here is kind of like what you do to the sliders in Lightroom. There's that. And then pretend you're adding a layer mask or one of those masks in Lightroom. When you add an additional node like this, on a Mac, you hit Option S. This is like creating a mask in Lightroom, okay? That's the easiest way I can explain it. So it's complicated because it's not super intuitive, but that's essentially what we're doing here. So over on this side, I can add a LUT to this group. So we're gonna go back to group post clip. And over here, now these buttery LUTs are what I typically use for my Blackmagic files. They create a nice buttery look, if you will. Like I said, I usually use this for Blackmagic design, but I'm going to try to use it for this anyway and just kind of make the adjustments I need to the overall clip. So we're just going to add this buttery LUT, this natural Rec 709 to the group node, but we're going to switch back to clip at this point. And then we're going to have to go through and make adjustments to each individual frame. So we can start by asking ourselves about this clip. Now, what is it about this clip that we don't like? For me, it's obviously, it feels a little too blue. So we're going to go through and we're going to make adjustments to the blue. And if you look down at this panel here, think of it kind of, it's pretty self-explanatory once you understand it a little bit better, but you've got temperature control, tint control, contrast. This pivot controls the overall color. And then down here you've got color wheels. This is where Davinci Resolve really shines over Premiere, in my opinion, is the color correction. It's the industry standard for color correction, and it's a far superior product to even Final Cut Pro. And most pros will tell you that same thing. Final Cut Pro is a great program. Premiere is also a great program, but it's built on very old software, and it's harder to color correct, in my opinion. Davinci Resolve is where it's at. So these color wheels, you've got lift, gamma, gain, and offset. Think of this as your blacks, your shadows, your highlights, and, well, this is your midtones rather, and this is your overall. So on your shadows, for example, let's say you want more red in your shadows. You drag this all the way over to, you drag the center thing all the way over to your red. It's going to give you really red shadows. You drag all the way to the blue, it'll give you blue shadows, purple, purple shadows. So that said, if you notice that in your shadows it feels a little blue, what would you do? You would pull it away from the blue toward the yellow to reduce some of that shadowy look. Now you can see it feels kind of green, so we'll remove it away from the green. And now we've got, it's a little more in this yellowish red area. So now we've got a better corrected look. So this is kind of what it looked like before, after. Before, a little blue, after, a little more color corrected. This one feels like the color is actually pretty decent with just the LUT added. So if you remember, this is part of that group. So if we want to see what it looks like without that LUT added, it looks like that. This is the original file. This is with the LUT added. So I kind of like the look it creates. It's a little stormy looking. Now we're at the clip of the exterior. The green looks nuclear, so we want to do something about that. The scene feels overall pretty flat, so we're going to fix that by adding some contrast. And we'll probably add a little bit of warmth because it feels pretty cool overall. So let's go ahead and just start working on that. So we'll start with the temperature control. We'll just slide it over to the warmth a little bit. We're going to start by adding some contrast here. We'll use the contrast slider, but we're probably going to have to come in here. And there's also, by the way, there's these wheels down here. If you slide them to the left, it gets darker. Slide them to the right, it gets brighter. Okay. Again, this green is a little too nuclear for me, so this is where, kind of like in Lightroom, you added a mask. You do the same thing here. It's called a node, though. So on the Mac, you hit Option S, it creates a new node, and I can select with the eyedropper this green area. Oops, gotta come into here first. Select this green area, and as you can see in this little node here, it selects only those greens. And what I can do from here is I can come in and I can desaturate those. Go back to my color wheels. I can desaturate the greens. Whoops, went kind of overkill there. I'm just gonna desaturate them a little bit and maybe add a little bit of, take some of the green out and add a little bit of magenta. Maybe even a little bit of yellow, actually. That feels better. And we'll compare it to the previous clip. Looks pretty good to me. And now we've got our drone footage. We'll go ahead and mess with that. Just add some saturation to it, maybe a little bit of contrast. Needs a little bit more brightness in here, so we'll bring the highlights up, bring the blacks down. The famous DJI footage. DJI footage, in my opinion, is some of the worst color ever, but it's manageable when you know how to use your color wheels. So obviously this is way too cool. We need to warm this up a little bit, so we're just going to start by dragging our slider this way. The problem with using these sliders is, as you can see, it turns the sky too warm, and we don't want that. We just want these warm. So let's go ahead and just mess with these. We're going to start in the midtones. I'm sorry, in the shadows actually is where we should be starting. And we're going to warm them up by dragging the circle away from the blue. We'll also go into the midtones, do the same thing. That feels better. Actually, the shadows are probably a little bit too yellow at this point, so we'll go ahead and back that off. Highlights are kind of yellow, so we're going to make those a little less yellow. And that's looking a lot better. Now these still look very blue, so again we're going to add a node. We're going to come into our eyedropper. We're going to select that blue range. And I'm going to reduce the blue. Actually, we're going to warm those up. Even if I can kind of desaturate them a little bit, that'll be helpful. You can see it's kind of catching some of this up here, so we don't want that. So we're going to actually come back to here and refine our mask a little bit. We just want maybe this selected. Overall, it's not really working how I wanted it to. So this is before and this is after. I kind of like the direction it's going with that, but it's still not quite to my liking. I need to keep messing with it a little bit more. Let's start over with this node again. So one of the challenges we're going to run into is that the problem is it actually was kind of this color in reality. So any color we change it to, it's going to look kind of strange. So it's going to take a lot of finagling to try to get it to be less blue. We can keep on messing around with it a little bit, and we'll eventually get to where we want. We're going to add one more node here, and I want to try to get the overall blues. And we'll see if we can just warm these up a bit. And then maybe I can subtract from up here. So we'll go into here, and I'll do a pen tool, and I can actually just come up here. Whoops. Come up here in the sky, and make sure that the sky itself is deselected. As you can see, I can kind of mask that off a little bit. So that feels a little better, but it's still, you know, it's super blue. And there's just not a lot we can do about that. It's just what we have to deal with, I think. And if I were a better colorist, I could definitely fix this a little bit more, but I think I've kind of hit my limit. Oops. It feels a little better. The sky is still yellow though, so we need to fix that. Maybe what we need to do is move this. Oops. It's not perfect, but it's a better direction. So we'll go ahead and play that. And then we got this kind of a similar issue here. Just want to select the mountains here. Try to warm them up a little bit. That's better. And then we also have kind of, these buildings are a little dark, so we're just going to try to do those in here actually. And it doesn't quite work. Overall, this is a little cool, so we'll warm this up a bit. As you can see, this is kind of going a little bit nuclear in the sky over here, so we need to actually, we'll redo that. This also, so what I'm actually going to do with this shot is I'm going to remove this from, you know what, that's probably my problem now that I'm thinking about it. I forgot, again, DJI footage sucks, and I forgot I have this in that color group. So we're going to remove this from the color group because, there we go. Now we all of a sudden have control over the footage again. So we're going to remove anything we've done from it. I'm going to remove this one from the group too, maybe. Let me see. Yes, all of a sudden we've got significantly more control over this footage. So we can add some saturation to it. That's the problem with LUTs, and that's why they're not exactly presets. See, we don't need that, and we'll refine this a little bit. Let's see. There we go. Okay, that's better, and then we'll go ahead and saturate this a little bit more, maybe add some contrasts. That looks a lot better. It's not as nuclear as the last one. This one as well, we can kind of mess with the overall controls on this one. The midtones feel a little blue, so I'm going to pull that towards the yellow. The shadows feel a little blue as well. Highlights I'm okay with being more blue. Not too, actually a little more purple it seems it needed. Add some contrast on this thing, just a little bit. That feels fine to me for now. We're going to remove this one from the LUT as well. There we go. And I want to reduce these greens, so let's go ahead and do that. Same way we did it before, we're going to select the greens here. And I can actually come down here to these panels and broaden the greenery it selects. There we go. And then we'll just come back to the color panel and we'll desaturate it a little bit. Just a little bit. And we're also going to warm it up just a hair. So this is before, this is after. It's a very subtle difference, but it does make a difference in my opinion. All right, so now we're inside, and we can go ahead and start grading inside. Again, the LUT, this is still assigned to all of the LUTs. If we look at, this is before, without the LUT, this is with the LUT. So now we just need to color correct accordingly. Now this one feels a little blue. I can go back to this original clip and it's kind of has the same vibe as this going on. So what I can do is I can actually copy Command C and do Option V, and I can paste the color adjustments that I made into here, and these now match. Now this is what I was talking about. There are shortcuts, and this is one of them. I should also add that what should be happening is down here we should see an RGB parade. For some reason it's not showing up, and what this does, it helps you color balance, and for some reason for me it's not showing up. I don't know if there's an issue with Resolve right now, but I did recently update it, so it's possible that I need to re-update it again. But typically what happens is you'll see like a color waveform here, and it's not there, so I have to kind of go by eyeballs with this. So we're also going to copy this color onto here, and we'll copy it onto this as well. Now these are raw files. Now this is going to be interesting. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go into, well, first of all, I'll show you what it looks like if I paste those colors. It doesn't really do a whole lot. It makes it look more yellow. So raw files have their own process. Now the thing about shooting with raw files, and you know, I use a Blackmagic Cinema camera to do this, is that raw, you have the same control over video files that you do with raw photos. Like, so I can adjust highlights significantly. I have significantly more dynamic range. I can see out windows much easier. I can adjust color temperature after the fact. So if it's a little warm, I can adjust it. If it's a little cool, I can adjust it. Exposure is no problem. I have full control, just like I have full control over a raw photo. So what I wanted this to do, and this kind of is feeling a little bit more magenta to me, so I need to adjust this. It's like a little bit too purple. We'll warm this up a little bit. And I'm going to bring the exposure down as well. I want these clips to kind of match up with that last one. Take some of the green out of here. Actually. Feels good. So I want this clip to match up with this previous clip as much as possible. So we're going to go back into our raw file, and we're just going to kind of mess with it in here first before I go back into the color panel and mess with it in there. So we're going to see what we can do within this panel. Flip back and forth. We got quite a ways to go yet. Bring the saturation up. Looking pretty good. Feels pretty purple, so we're going to bring the green back in a little bit. And I think what we'll do is just adjust the white balance a bit. It's getting there. It's pretty close. In fact, this is probably a little more accurate than this. So I'm actually going to adjust this to better match the other clip. So it's getting there. This still feels a little bit too magenta, so I think we can start playing in here at this point. That's a pretty decent match. Now, I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it onto these. And on this one as well. And then I'm going to go back to this clip, and I'm going to highlight the next 3 raw clips. In fact, I'm going to go all the way to all my other raw clips. And you can see where it says Blackmagic Raw down here. And we're going to use settings right down here. And that will apply the same raw details as what we have on these files. So let's watch this. So once the door closed, it got obviously a lot darker in this. Got a lot darker in this room. So super bright, went to super dark. So let's make these a little brighter. Just so it's not as dramatic of a difference. That's good. Okay. So this is a little blown out. We're going to come back into this panel. We're going to bring our highlights down a little bit. And I think this is just, I don't know if this is a result of the LUT. Let's see. No, it's just a blown out clip. So we will go ahead and we're going to copy this color again and paste it into here so that we have some consistency. Oops. It makes me wonder if I probably need to make these a little less green now that I'm looking at it. So we'll add some magenta back into here. Actually, the magenta needs to be more in the highlights, not so much in the chairs, so we will do that here. That's a little too much. So what we're actually going to do is add another node. We're going to select just these guys. And we will just adjust the magenta on the whites. As you can see, it's a bit of a difference. So we'll go ahead and copy this node. We'll add a new node to this layer. Paste the colors. We'll add a new node to this layer and paste that information as well. So and again on this one, maybe I need to back this off because this part should not be as magenta. So let's go ahead and just select that. I'm going to remove the magenta out of here. It's a little too purple. Let's try that. Okay, feeling pretty good about that. Now this feels pretty green, obviously, so let's come into our raw controller. And we're going to cool this up a little bit. Warm this up. Let's bring the exposure up a little bit. Our highlights down. Come back into here. Let's go ahead and copy this color and put it into here. But I actually do need to. There we go, that's better. This feels a little blue, so again, we're going to copy these settings, and I'm literally going to paste this onto all of these because this is probably what we need in terms of color. And if you've noticed, we are giving this an overall warmer look inside because, like I said, it was very gloomy and overcast this day, so which gave it kind of a blue look. So having it be a little bit warmer inside kind of brings back that Vegas sunshine, like what it should look like. It's not perfect, but it does help a little bit. All right, so let's see what we got here. This is a little dark, so let's just go ahead and, it's not that bad actually. Add a little bit of contrast to this so it's not as flat. Okay, so here's this clip. We need to try to get this to match this. So first and foremost, it feels a little green. Bring the magenta up to 20. Let's bring up the exposure a bit. And we're going to add some contrast. It feels a little better. It still needs to be a little bit warmer. So we'll warm it up. This almost feels too magenta now, so let's bring the magenta back on this. And again, if I had my RGB parade here, I'd be able to better tell if it's a really good guide on whether or not your color is working out. But for some reason, it's not showing up. So I apologize for not being able to show that to you guys. These match pretty close. I mean, it's close enough. It doesn't have to be perfect for the sake of this video, but you can keep on dialing it in until you're at a place that you're happy with. But for the most part, I'm going to keep it here. Let's copy the color and paste them onto each of the raw files, and then we're going to come back to the raw editor. Whoops. And use settings across these 3 clips. So what should happen, okay, this needs some shadows. More shadow in here. This could use some contrasts. Okay, this feels pretty green, so let's go ahead and make this warmer, or add some magenta in there, and we're going to cool it off a little bit. We want it to match with these clips, so that's pretty good. It's okay that the highlights are a little blown out. All right, now as you can see, it kind of warmed things up a little bit. Everything was blue and overcast, but it makes me realize that I do need to go back to the beginning here and kind of warm up some of these clips as well, because I feel like these are all still a little bit too blue. Let's see. I don't like this teal looking sky. Let's correct that. Take some of the green out of it. See if we take some of the green out of this too. Again, we're just warming things up a little bit and adding some more contrast. This one, part of me almost wants to go back and select one of the daylight clips that we had from the day before. I think I might actually do that. There's also a little bit of motion happening in that too. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and select one of these, I think. Yep. That is what we are going to do. Now, all of a sudden, the whole video was shot on a sunny day, but that original establishing shot made it feel a little bit gloomy out. So I feel better about this. Now we just have to color correct this one. So let's go ahead and select. We're going to use this, actually, and just see what that gives us. Definitely need some more contrast. And we, of course, need to correct our verticals. Okay, that feels a lot better to me. I don't know if you guys feel the same relief that I do, but it feels a lot better to me. All right, so this, I actually want to darken up a little bit. Oh, sorry, I should explain what I'm doing here is when this is fading in, I still want this to remain a little dark so that the text shows up a little better. So that's kind of what I'm doing here. We're gonna bring the highlights down a little bit. And I think we'll expand this a little bit. This one we could probably warm up a little bit just so it looks a little less, it's more the sky needs to be bluer. So let's select the sky. And we'll just cool that down a little bit. Just a little bit. All right, let's take a look at this. Feels a little too warm to me, so overall it's a little warm. So the midtones need to be cooler. I think it still needs more, like the midtones are too dark. It still needs to be, no, it's overall too cool. Again, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but if I had that RGB parade here, it'd be a lot easier to see what's happening. Still maybe a little too green. It's not entirely rendered yet, so you're going to hear this skipping. In fact, what we'll do is we'll switch our playback. We'll do half resolution. That needs some stabilization on that clip. This one still feels a little too green to me, so let's go back here, add some magenta here. This one is also a little too green. This might be too magenta. This is also a little too magenta. Too magenta. And I think we've got ourselves a video, you guys. Now, typically what I suggest doing is let it sit overnight, or even just an hour. You have to get up and walk away from it, come back, watch it several times, make minor adjustments to things that you notice, and once you come back and you don't see anything you need fixed, the video is done. Now, I've been talking through this, and this video is several hours long, but imagine how fast it goes when I'm not talking through it and trying to explain things. I highly recommend everybody check out Davinci Resolve. And let me know if you have any questions on this particular video. But hopefully you found this helpful. The last thing I have to do is go through and actually change the address information, and I forgot to do that, but I have to look it up and I don't have that handy. So from here, what we do is obviously we need to export this thing. So you go to Delivery tab. And honestly, guys, I don't overthink this. I literally just export this as, I go to this H.264 master. I'll title the the video based on the address. I will select my upload destination, and I will literally just hit add to render queue and hit render all. Now it's going to go through and it's going to export this video. I will show it to you. Well, I'm going to go through and I'm going to do what I said, and I'm going to let this sit for a while. I'm going to come back and revisit some things, and I will show you the final video now. Hope you enjoyed this. Let me know if you have any questions.